folks, Manny CA with another informational, educational, entertaining video, maybe, I hope, on the shooting sports. This time, firearms maintenance, design, and function. I mean, this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I just never got around to doing it, but I got additional footage from our 1858 stainless, which, you know, they never made a 1858 Remington in a stainless, so it's kind of like a dream gun, but it's kind of fun because it's black powder. Yeah, the 1858 stainless, I did I lightened the trigger on it a few years back, and I did a video with the intent of putting it out, but I never did. Stuff happened. I got around. I thought I'd pause the video. We're out here in the gun room, and we got a movie on. Of course, what else are we going to be watching? But Westerns. Spaghetti Westerns. They got a great channel. The guy's name is like Grand Django or something like that on YouTube. He's got all the Spaghetti Westerns, and that's what we do. We come out here, we work, and we watch, or we load ammo, or we hang out, and I thought I put it on pause, but I didn't. Oh, the movie I'm watching right now, it's called Compañeros. So if you get a chance to see it, it's freaking awesome. 2 hours long, lots of gunplay, a lot of cool guns. They had a Russian, looked like a Smith & Wesson Russian that I saw. Your typical bevy of single action armies, really neat stuff. Oh, and then they even has some old, looks like Model T, some of the first cars. I'm not a car guy, so I don't know. I'm more of a gun guy, but you guys know that. You're gonna wanna buy parts, of course. You're gonna need a single action trigger. And then these triggers, you know, right now, I was online looking them up. Triggers are 25 bucks. Hammers look like they're about 40 to 50 bucks. So, depends on what you want to do. Buy spare triggers, especially if this is your first time. Buy spare triggers, buy spare triggers, buy spare triggers, buy spare triggers, buy. Spare. Triggers. Now that we got that out of the way, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, then don't do it. I don't really like calling it a trigger job. Kind of reminds me of what a prostitute will do. First thing you should know is that all single actions are basically the same. We've got our Cap and Ball 1860. We've got our single action Army, and then we've got our Ruger single action. All single actions function all the same way. Before we go on, we're gonna teach you a couple of fundamentals. Yeah, I know, it's gonna be boring. This is lecture. Hey, I did enough school already. I don't wanna go back. But this is gun stuff, so it is all fun. For me at least, and if not for you, don't watch. We're gonna talk theory. Oh yeah, just like any class, you have your background that you need to understand. If you don't understand it, don't do it, because you're gonna get hurt, or you're gonna hurt yourself or somebody else. Here is your basic single action hammer. They will all look just about the same, but you have variances. This is a single action Army trigger, and you can tell because it has this straight edge over here, and then the bevel over here. The bolt is right here, and you've got the pin, the firing pin. It looks like it's kind of separate. Rugers don't look like this. You guys know Ruger has a plunger here, so they're just about a little bit different. But when it comes to the full cock notch and the safe notch and the load notch, they're all the same. All single action hammers have three of the same things. They've got a safe notch, which is this notch right here. This notch, you see how it has a little lip in there? That's where the trigger sits in. That's why when they say it's not really safe, because if you give a hard blow to the back of the hammer, you can shear that off and the gun will go off. So something to keep in mind. Next up is your load notch. This is the notch that you put when you're loading the gun, and you're able to rotate the cylinder to load all the chambers. And next we have our full cock notch. This is the notch that we're gonna be focusing on. This is the notch that we use when you pull the trigger. So now that you guys know what these three parts are called, we're gonna move on to the actual trigger itself. There's a single action trigger. This part of the theory goes across all triggers. It doesn't matter if you're shooting a semi-automatic, rifle, pistol, shotgun, whatever. This applies to all. There are three stages that triggers can be in. Positive, which we show here, neutral, and negative. We're gonna go through each one because they each play an important role. And you need to know which state your trigger is in before you do anything to it. This is the mode that when your trigger is in, it's the most safe. What that means is when you cock your hammer and you try to push it, it doesn't go. You're pushing the notch into the trigger. And the trigger is at an angle where it's not gonna give up. It's not gonna push off. That's what push off is called. When the trigger is pulled, the rear of the sear will rotate the hammer back just like maybe half a thousandths. It has to be positive to cam the trigger back before release. The more positive the trigger is, the heavier it will be. So it needs to be positive without being excessive. Anywhere from 2, 3, 4 pound trigger pull. When you cock the gun and you pull the trigger, you will feel like this one. What'll happen is this hammer will actually go back a little bit as it's clearing the sear because of the angle that's on the sear of the trigger. That's what it needs to do. That will keep your gun safe from going into what's known as push off. When you cock it and then you try to push it and it goes off, that's not good. A negative sear engagement is what you can see here, is anything from this way on down. That's what you don't want. That will make the gun either not stay cocked or push off very, very easily. Next up is what's known as the neutral trigger. That's when the angle is cut straight across the trigger. And that is dangerous also because at any moment, it could slip right off of the sear and fire the gun. This is something you want to avoid also. We want to avoid a neutral or a negative trigger, and we want to cut our sear so it's in what's known as the positive mode. Positive. That is a 35 to 40 degree angle. You see that? When we break this, it's going to be at a 35 to 40 degree angle. What this is called is the Colt system of the trigger. And it's like we said before, these are production guns, not high quality. They're safe, but they're not really, we could say, shooter friendly. We modify the trigger to replicate this Colt style by cutting the back of the trigger sear at a 35 to 40 degree angle. And if for you folks who are not aware of what a 35 to 40 degree angle looks like, I've got this handy dandy protractor here so you can see. I like to use a fine India stone and finish it off with an Arkansas stone because this is really, really smooth. You take your trigger and you hold it at that 35 to 40 degree angle, and then you just make your cut. Go this way when you're stoning. That way you keep the level as straight as you can. There's a reason why they charge $100 plus for the fixtures, people, because they can. That's why we told you to buy a couple of different triggers. Stone it on that angle and go slow. 2, 3 passes, reassemble the gun, and check out your trigger weight. When you do this, you shorten the trigger a little bit. The trigger falls into the full cock notch sooner than it used to. It's like shortening the hand. So after a trigger job, we need to stretch the hand too. But if you are just shortening a little bit, then you really don't have to do it. But if you kind of keep going on and on and on, shortening a little bit at a time, look back in the Accurate Revolver playlist and we'll show you our method, and it's really easy anyway, to lengthen your hand. If that happens, you're gonna have to retime your cylinder stop. Basically what I'm trying to tell you is do not take too much off your trigger, people, because if you take too much, and when I say too much, like 5 or 6 or 7 thousandths, you're gonna have to retime your gun, and that's a whole nother video altogether. So do it sparingly, otherwise you're gonna have a lot of work to do. Reassemble the gun, feel the trigger, how does it work? Feel good? Feel too heavy? Another thing is check the push off. Assemble the gun and try to disengage by putting a few pounds of pressure behind your hammer after every time you fit it. If at any time it pushes off, you have taken too much. That trigger basically is junk. Get rid of it and get a new one. If you cut your trigger sear too short, you're gonna have to stretch your hand. Stretch the hand on a punch below the second shelf. Like we said, watch the video. We stretch the hand so the trigger falls into the full cock notch of the hammer as the hand has rotated the cylinder into index and the bolt is locked in place. After you get done stoning your sear, you want to come through and do a systems check to make sure that everything is still up to par. Take and cock your gun, put it into the safe. There's the safe notch. Give it a push. Does it stay there? Very good. We're not hammering nails, people. Don't be driving this. You can break something. But safety is safety. And this, you're given about 5 or 6 pounds, I think, of pressure. Nothing is moving. Everything is nice. Next, you're gonna check your load notch. Does it hold the cylinder and hand in position when we rotate the cylinder backwards? Yeah. You can see that cylinder lines up with the ejector rod. That's one thing you want to double check. Rotate and then come back. And the last thing is the full cock notch. Cock the gun fully and try to push off. Induce push off. Nothing? Congratulations, you just did an excellent trigger job. What happens if you took too much off or it doesn't hold on any of the 3 positions? Something happened, you screwed up, sorry. Hey, ask me how I know. I've screwed up enough trigger and hammer relationships. You'll see the relationship between the hammer and the trigger. And what happens is the top of the trigger engages these notches. And what you're doing is you're limiting the amount of engagement on the full cock notch when you cut your trigger on the 40-degree angle, 35 to 40-degree angle. There's less here holding right here on the edge. And then what happens is when you start moving it, this negative angle, well, it's positive, but the way it's set up right here, it kind of pushes off and it helps to push off. The relationship between the hammer and the trigger is what we're working on when we do this. The way we cut this angle helps this to release. To lessen your trigger pull, you follow the directions that we just gave you. But if you have a long, creepy trigger, that can be fixed by taking your stone and taking off this area right here, right above the full cock notch. What you're gonna do is you're gonna stone the area in red, right above the full cock notch. I advise you, if you do this, go slow, polish and keep your angles straight. That will seriously reduce the creep in your gun. Did you notice the lack of the turn ring? Oh yeah, we've shot this gun plenty of times, but the lack of the turn ring, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Look, let me show you if you can get a close up just to see just how smooth and creep free this trigger is. Remember, the shorter the trigger gets, the harder it gets to time the gun correctly. The hand gets less time to index the cylinder. The longer the trigger is, the easier it is to time the gun. So what happens if you wreck a trigger on a rare or hard to find gun? The easiest thing to do is to trace and cut out a new trigger following the contours on a piece of steel. Using a file it down, and don't forget to harden it, and that's a whole nother video altogether. Maybe. Check this out. And I never, ever drop a hammer on an empty chamber. I'm gonna use this is just an eraser from a number 2 pencil, just to soften the blow a little bit. You see that? 1.9, it's a 2-pound trigger. I did that on purpose. I like my triggers to be light. 1.99 this time. 2-pound trigger, people. This trigger is phenomenal, is awesome to use. You saw how we recontoured the hammer spring. You saw the trigger job that we just went through and we described to you guys. You can do it. This is not rocket science. Hey, if you ruin a few parts, that's all the name of the game. What I would do is get a couple of parts, get a gun that you're kind of so-so about, something that if you wreck it, you're not gonna be crying to mommy. It's not like a percussion gun. These things are cheap enough. You can mess with them and learn before you move on to your prize Ruger or your prized single action army. This is a Cimarron reproduction, by the way. Excellent piece in 45 Colt. More about this guy later. Hopefully you guys have learned something during this session. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, send them on down. Don't be afraid, don't be scared, it's not black magic. Give it a go, try it out. But if it's beyond your scope of comfortableness, I would say, then don't do it. Till next time.